The Master. We both bow. We return to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by James Haughton Woods. Book 1. What else comes to him? 29. Therefore comes the right knowledge of him who thinks in an inverse way, and the removal of obstacles. Whatever obstacles there be, disease and the rest, all these are removed by devotion to the Ishvara, and the yogin comes to a sight of his own real self. He has seen the right knowledge, which sees that as the Ishvara is a self, and is undefiled and undisturbed by hindrances, and isolated and exempt from accidents, so he also is a self conscious by reflection of its thinking substance. What in addition comes to him? Therefore comes the right knowledge of him who thinks in an inverse way, and the removal of obstacles. One is inverted who knows in an opposite way. To the ordinary person, whose mind stuff flows out and becomes modified by objects, one who thinks in that way thinks inversely. In other words, the ordinary man, still under the conditions of undifferentiated consciousness, an avidyavant. In such wise, the author demarks such a one from the Ishvara, who is free from undifferentiated consciousness, vidyavant, and who is endowed with eternal superiority of the sattva. Right knowledge comes to the kind of thinking which is under the conditions of undifferentiated consciousness, and which is inverted. A perception of himself as he is in his own self comes to him. Obstacles and the removal of them are to be described. Book 2, 82. The words whatever give the exposition of these latter words. The word own refers to his soul, Atman, that is, his self. The word self, rupa, excludes all qualities attributed to him by undifferentiated consciousness. One might well say that devotion to the Ishvara has the Ishvara as its object. How then can it apparently give a direct perception, a thinking in the inverse way, upon one's own real self? For this would prove too much. In reply to this he says, as the Ishvara, undefiled, not subject to the origination or dissolution, insofar as he is absolutely unchanged, undisturbed means free from hindrances. Isolated means beyond the scope of merit and demerit, and consequently exempt from accidents. Accidents are birth and length of life and kind of experience. Book 2, 13. Since a homogeneity implies a certain degree of difference, he shows the difference between selves in general and the Ishvara by saying, conscious by reflection of its thinking substance. In such wise, the word inverse has been described. In the case of two objects which are totally irrelevant to each other, prolonged meditation on either one unfits one for a direct perception of the other, whereas prolonged meditation upon one object proves to be of service for the direct perception of another similar to it. Similarly, the study of one book proves to be a service for the acquisition of knowledge of another book similar to it. As for the immediately perception, pratyasakte, it is the cause of direct perception in regard to one's own self, but not with regard to another self. Thus, by meditating upon the Ishvara, we learn about our own selves. Thus, the argument is cleared up. But what are these obstacles? those which distract the mind stuff. But what are these that are distractive? And, how many are they? He replies, 30. Sickness, and languor, and doubt, and heedlessness, and listlessness, and worldliness, evirati, and erroneous perception, and failure to attain any stage of concentration, and instability in the state when attained. These distractions of the mind stuff are the obstacles. They are 9 obstacles, the distractions of the mind stuff. These appear together with the fluctuations of the mind stuff, and they are not found where the aforesaid fluctuations of mind stuff are not. Sickness is a disorder in the humors of the body, are in the secretions, are in the organs. Languor is a lack of activity in the mind stuff. Doubt is a kind of thinking which touches both alternatives of a dilemma, so that one thinks this might be so, might not be so. Heedless is a lack of reflection upon the means of attaining concentration. Listlessness is a lack of effort due to heaviness of body or of mind stuff. Worldliness is greed of the mind stuff, and its essence lies in addiction to objects of sense. Erroneous perception is the thinking of misconceptions. Failure to attain any stage is not attaining any stage of concentration. I was going to say something about the inverse thing about the adversarial quality. But anyways, I don't remember what I was going to say. Erroneous perception, thinking of misconceptions. Failure to attain any stage is not attaining any stage of concentration. Instability in the state, when attained, is the failure of the mind stuff to remain in the stage attained. If the concentrated stage of development had been reached, the mind stuff would, of course, have remained in it. Thus, it is that these distractions are called the 9 blemishes of yoga, and the 9 foes of yoga, and the obstacles of yoga. He asks the question by saying, what? He gives the answer in general with the words, those which. With regard to their kinds and their number, he asks, but what? He gives the answer by the sutra beginning with the word 30, sickness. Obstacles are 9, the fluctuations of mind stuff, and obstructive to yoga and opposed to yoga. Distractions of the mind stuff are, of course, so called because sickness and the other obstacles detract or divert the mind stuff from yoga. He gives the reason for their being foes to yoga by saying these together with, first, in the case of doubt and of erroneous perception, they are foes to the restriction of fluctuations from the mere fact that they are fluctuations, and of those that are not fluctuations, such as sickness and the rest, these too are foes to it because they associate with fluctuations. He explains the things intended by the words beginning with sickness. The humors, dhatu, wind and bile and phlegm, are so called because they sustain the rasa, the body. A secretion is a special kind of mutation of nourishment, eaten or drunk. The organs are the senses, indriya. A disorder in them is a state of defect or excess. A lack of activity is an incapacity for action. Doubt is a kind of thinking which touches both alternatives of a dilemma, although there is no difference between doubt and error. Viparyasa, insofar as both do not remain in the proper form of that in respect to that which they are entertain, still by emphasizing the subsidiary difference, that is, the touching or not touching of the 2 alternatives of the dilemma. A distinction in this case of doubt is made clear. A lack of reflection is a lack of action. This is about the same as saying that it is a lack of effort with regard to this thing. Heaviness of the body is the result of phlegm. Heaviness of the mind stuff is the result of tamas. Greed is thirst. The stages of concentration are the madhu mati, and the other three. If after reaching a given stage, the yogin should deem himself sufficiently well off with only so much progress, there would be a breach in the concentration, and as a result, there would be a retrogression. Even from that stage, an effort should therefore be made in such a way that when the yogin has reached concentration, the mind stuff should be stable there. And so 30, sickness and languor and doubt and heedlessness and listlessness and worldliness and erroneous perception and failure to attain any stage and instability in the state, these distractions of the mind stuff are the obstacles. See over there. 31. Pain and despondency and unsteadiness of the body, and inspiration and expiration are the accompaniments of the distractions. Pain proceeding from the self, and pain proceeding from living creatures, and pain proceeding from, well, the demons, right? Or would it be the angels? What are they referring to? Devis? Asuras? What? Pain is that by which the living beings are stricken down, and for the destruction of which they struggle. Despondency is agitation of mind due to an impediment to the fulfillment of a desire. Unsteadiness of the body is that which makes it unsteady and makes it tremble. Inspiration is breathing, which sips in the air which is outside. Expiration is that which makes abdominal air flow outwards. These are the accompaniments of the distractions. These occur in one whose mind stuff is distracted. These do not occur in one whose mind stuff is concentrated. Not only the 9 obstacles, but also pain and the other accompaniments of these obstacles occur to this. So, Vyasa recites the sutra beginning with the word 31. Pain. Pain is that which is to be felt as unpleasant. Pain proceeding from the self boldly by virtue of sickness or mental, by virtue of such things as passion. Pain proceeding from living creatures is such as is generated by tigers. Pain proceeding from what people consider gods is such as is generated by the baleful influence of planets. Because certainly when people say this because of this and this constellation, stuff like this, they're not really they tend really not to be talking about anything scientific. It's a mythological thing where the stars are considered as gods, right? And the planets and comets and whatever. And this pain, inasmuch as living beings in general would feel it to be unpleasant, is to be rejected. Accordingly, he says, by which stricken down the breathing, which without volitional action sips in the air which is outside and drinks it, or makes it enter, this inspiration is opposed to emission, or chaka, which is accessory to concentration. The breathing also, which without volitional action makes abdominal air flow outwards and expels it. This expiration is opposed to inhalation, puraka, which is an accessory to concentration. And furthermore, these distractions, the foes of concentration, are to be restricted by the same practice and passionlessness. Of these two, in summing up, he describes the object which the practical applies. 32. To check them, let there be practice upon a single entity. To check them, let the yogin practice his mind stuff by making it rest upon a single entity. but one whose mind stuff is nothing more than an idea limited to one object after another, and is momentary. The Samkhya of this Buddhist, the mind stuff as a whole is surely not single in intent, and it surely is not distracted. I'm thinking of the chaos magic way of, oh, we're going to believe and practice this, and then we're going to switch, and then we're going to switch. But you really got to believe and practice. But if this mind stuff, when single in intent, is withdrawn from all objects and concentrated upon one's entity, then it may be said to be single in intent, and hence not limited to one object after another. If on the other hand, in the opinion of him who maintains that the mind stuff becomes single in intent, as a stream of similar ideas, singleness in intent be a property of the mind stuff, as a stream, that the mind stuff conceived as a stream could not be a single thing, because, as he insists, it changes from moment to moment. If, however, it be maintained that singleness of intent is as a property of an idea only so far as it forms a part of this stream, then whether it consists in a stream of similar ideas or in a stream of dissimilar ideas, it is all of it, in no wise other than single in intent, inasmuch as it is limited to one object after another, and the fact that the mind stuff is distracted is unexplained. Therefore it may be said that the mind stuff is a single thing, and has many intended objects, and is stable. Furthermore, if ideas accidentally related and different in nature were produced by a single mind stuff, then what a situation! One idea would be the remembrancer of a thing seen by another idea, and one idea would be later than the experiencer of the latent impression of karma accumulated by another idea. Even if this could in some way be harmonized, samadhiya, it would surpass in falsity the maxim of cow dung as a milky preparation. Moreover, if the mind stuff is to be done as one idea after another, then the Buddhist who holds this opinion denies the experience of his own self. How does the idea I, in such expressions as I am touching what I have seen, and I am seeing what I have touched, inhere in one common abhaya, substrate of ideas? If all the ideas have nothing in common, how could the idea I am undivided self, which has a single idea, I, as its object, and which persists in absolutely different mind stuffs, become apostatized, achrayat, in one generic substrate of ideas? The idea I am this undivided self is noble in one's own experience. Moreover, the authority of a perception is not overthrown by that of any other source of valid ideas, whereas any other source of valid ideas comes to use only by virtue of a perception. Consequently, the mind stuff is one, and has many objects, and is stable. He introduces a sutra which summarizes the meaning which he has been stating. This he does by saying, furthermore, these. Furthermore, that is, after the meaning which he has been stating, the connexion of the sentence is that he sums up by reciting this sutra. The reason why the distractions must be restricted is told by the words, the foes of concentration, although the words beginning by devotion to the Ishvara, 1:23, refer to practice only. Still, in this case, passionlessness must be deemed to be a cooperator with this practice. Accordingly, he says, by the same two already characterized, by practice and passionlessness, distractions are to be restricted. The words of these mean of these two, namely the practice and passionlessness. The words, the practice, that which is to be described next. 32. To check them, practice upon a single entity. Tawheed, the worship of one God, the following of one leader. Of course, following one leader in terms of saying, he confirms the previous sent ones, Avaparas, a single entity, that is the Ishvara, for he is the subject matter of the discussion. According to the Destructionist, the mind stuff as a whole is single in intent, that is, not in any degree whatsoever distracted. Consequently, their teachings and their actions subservient to their teachings are meaningless, as he says in the words, but one whose. He refers to one in whose opinion the mind stuff is directed to one object after another, whether to one at a time or to more than one at a time, limited in time, that is present, samutpanna, only so long as the intended object is vivid, abhasa, and ending just as there and not going elsewhere. Why not first take the foremost intended object and afterwards take the next object? In reply, he says, and is momentary. Inasmuch as a moment is indivisible, it cannot have within itself the relation of before and after. In our system, however, since mind stuff is not momentary, and since it can be stable with regard to its object, whether this be one or many, and since at each moment, insofar as one object is taken and another left, mind stuff can be distracted. Consequently, by removing the mutations of distraction, singleness of intent may be imposed upon the mind stuff. That the teachings and the doing of this is not futile is stated in the words, but if. He sums up by saying, hence not. He sets up for refutation a destructionist, chikka, by the words, on the other hand, who. The meaning is that there shall be no attempt to impose singleness of intent upon a mind stuff that is single and momentary, but, in the case of a mind stuff, in serial order, that is from time to time without beginning, and that is not momentary. Distraction will be removed and singleness and intent will be imposed. He takes up these two alternatives and shows the faults of the one by saying of him, in his system, if singleness of intent is to be the property of the mind stuff, conceived as a stream or serial order of mind stuff, then the stream of mind stuff is not a unit and is not present in the presented ideas, put as they successively arise. Why is this so? Because in your system, whatever is at all, is all of it momentary? And there is nothing not momentary. This is the point. He takes up the other alternative in the words, if, however, a presented idea which is a portion of this whole subjective, samvrta stream, might be real. For this reason, the singleness of intent, with reference to this presented idea, would be a property belonging to a portion of the stream, and be obtained by an effort. He shows the fault in this alternative by saying, all of it. Accordingly, insofar as it has the form of a real being, it is, since it must be limited to one object after another, and because it therefore arises during the vividness, abhasa, of the object intended by this presented idea, and because it is finished during this moment of vividness, singleness and intent only, and thus the fact that the mind stuff is distracted remains unexplained. While it is to remove this distraction that the singleness in intent is imposed, he sums up by saying, therefore, hence also the mind stuff is one and has many objects, and is stable, as he explains by saying, furthermore, if, for just as chaitra, my stomach, even after eating, it's not settled too much. For just as chaitra cannot be he who remembers the book read by Maitra, and just as chaitra cannot be the enjoyer of the fruit of the latent impression of karma heaped up by Maitra, with which he has no connexion, whether meritorious or bad, so likewise something seen by one presented idea cannot be remembered by another presented idea, nor can the fruit of a latent deposit of karma heaped up by one presented idea be experienced by another idea. The destructionist might reply that his doctrine of momentariness does not prove too much, provided we add the qualification if there be a relation of cause and effect. For in such causes as the funeral sacrifices, Shraddha, and the Vaichvanari sacrifice, Isti, at the birth of a son, we find that the fruition of sacrifices passes, in the one case, to the father and the mother, and in the other case to the son, whereas none of the three is the actual agent in the sacrifice, or again in such cases as that of the bitter mango seeds that have been nourished with sweet juices, we see that the fruition, by an indirect process, must become sweet. Thus, the single effort of one momentary idea could find its result in another idea single in intent and indirectly related to it through a serial order. In reply to this, he says, even if this could in some way be harmonized, the connexion of thought is this: what shall we say is the difference between ideas resident in one serial order and different ideas resident in another serial order, so that when something has been experienced, or when some latent impression of karma has been heaped upon by an idea resident in one serial order, another idea belonging to the same serial order should be the one to remember or to enjoy it, and not an idea belonging to a different serial order. For this we call a serial order is not such a material real thing that it could as such distinguish the unit in the serial order, santanin, from the ideas resident in other serial orders. Furthermore, an imaginary distinction cannot consequently exert activity. Surely the Brahmin boy cannot cook with fire that he imagines to be present. Moreover, the relation of cause and effect is also nothing that is materially real in this case of the two ideas, one of which appears in a series after the other has disappeared, because it is impossible that there should be in the present time a substrate for two things which are not coexistent, such as there cannot be a substrate for two things separate in space, like the left horn and the other horn, which do not, however, coexist in time. For the past and the future cannot function as the present by merely partially in relation and partially out of relation. Vyasanja. Sense momentariness, by hypothesis assumed. Consequently, ideas are not under the limiting conditions either of serial order or of a causal relation which is a part of their being, and because they are real, they cannot, in so far as there are no reciprocal contacts, be distinguished from the other ideas, whether resident in the same serial order or in other serial orders. This same line of reasoning is continued by an allusion to the cow dung and the milk. Cow dung is milk because it is a product of the cow, like milk, which both sides admit to be a product of the cow. The Buddhist argument surpasses this in falsity. because it is superior in falsity, even to this line of reasoning, insofar as it is the false appearance of being a line of reasoning, and this system of ours cannot be charged with the fault of destroying what has been accomplished and accepting what has not been accomplished, for we hold that it is the mind stuff, that it is the agent of actions, it is the mind stuff that is connected with the pleasures and the pains generated by these actions. And I feel I should stop there for the moment. But remember that, this idea to all the paths and all the stuff, it's the same. It's not the same. And the more you look at it, the more you realize it's not the same. And don't let it realize the difference of things. Master, I and you both make mention